Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, it's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about how to build a skill rotation and how to look at a character, figure out some things about the character, ask some questions, do some testing, and then come away with a confident skill rotation. How do players look at a character, do some, gameplay, and then create and refine and perfect the character's optimal skill rotation? Of course, we can just pass around information, hey, everybody knows, or lots of players know, for example, with Sharon, you do 3, cancel that into 5, and then when she pulls it down, you cancel that into 4, and that's her skill rotation. But how did players actually get to that point, right? How did we get to the point where that was figured out to be the best rotation for Sharon Rogers? So I'm going to try to do all of that today. I'm going to give you guys multiple examples of characters. Because of the switching and the fact that I need to go through a bunch of different characters, we're going to be doing it primarily or almost exclusively in skill preview. So I apologize for that. It just takes way too long with way too many loading screens to test or to do this video from World Boss or whatever. So very simply, I want to give you guys a couple of pointers up front at the beginning. A skill is just anything that has a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or a 6 on it. Obviously, the X, the auto attack, doesn't count. Skill canceling, which you're going to hear as like cancel or C, is basically when you press one skill and then you interrupt it by pressing another skill. So the full animation for the first skill is she throws the shield, she shoots, and then the shield comes back. But you can interrupt that by pressing any of her other skills in between. So let's say I throw the shield, but then I just jump up. You can see not the full skill doesn't animate that first skill. The shield keeps spinning and then it pulls back to Sharon, but she doesn't get that blast off. So you sort of say, I want the shield throw, but I don't care about the blast, and I want to go into her fourth skill. Alternatively, you could do something else. You could do pretty much the opposite. You could jump into the air and be like, nah, I want to do her first skill. That's basically what skill canceling is, and you need to use it to be an effective player in Marvel Future Fight. If you don't skill cancel, most of the time you're playing a character suboptimally, not well. So yeah, for Sharon Rogers, we've basically agreed upon a rotation. Most players anyways. Of course, there's going to be some people who disagree, but most players, 3, 5, and then boom, and then 4. That's basically the skill rotation for Sharon Rogers. And then when she builds up her tier 3, and of course that's where you're going to get some more differences in opinion and whatever, it's 3, 5, and then she pulls it down, and then you do 6. So this is basically the rotation for Sharon Rogers. So now we're going to back out here, because the first thing that you need to do when you're not She-Hulk, the first thing that you actually need to do when you're trying to figure out a character's skill rotation, or you're trying to figure out why players are recommending you a skill rotation, is that the very first thing you need to do is you need to read the 5 skills. And this is what I do when I see characters on the PK, or this is what I do when I see characters on the patch notes, and I look for specific effects. You're not looking for the skill's damage. You're not looking for the percentage or anything like that, but you are primarily, there's other things you're looking for, but the first thing you're looking for is effects. And the major effect for Sharon Rogers and a lot of other characters is her third skill, having accumulation. Now, there's a lot of different things that you should look for. Accumulation is very important. There's 2 types of accumulation. There's damage dealt and there's damage taken. Her accumulation is damage taken. I don't want to get into the difference between those two. Maybe we can do a future video on that, but yeah. So she's got accumulation on damage taken. You also want to look for immunity or invincibility, because those are defensive skills. She has immunity on this skill, so this skill already has 2 really good buffs. You also want to look for buffs that increase the attack or the crit damage or the crit rate. Got a lot of frenzy buffs nowadays. Her 5th skill, look at that. It's got a 35% crit rate buff for 8 seconds. That's important. Okay. You want to look for all defense down skills with ignore immunity. You want to look for resistance down, like lightning or fire or whatever, resistance down, elemental resistance down effects on a skill, debuffs that ignores immunity. And you want to look for things like paralysis, charm, mind control, entice, those sorts of skills that will stop the boss in its tracks. All of those effects are important because that will help you to understand and help you to think in your head to prioritize, right? If a skill has a buff, you don't want to do it at the end. Now, that's not true 100% of the time, but it is true the majority of the time. If a skill has a buff, you probably want to get that skill off, maybe not first, but maybe second, right? You want to get it off sooner in the rotation rather than later. So for Sharon, we end with the 4th skill because the 4th skill doesn't have any. She has 0 effects on 1, 2, and 4. 1 is just a regular, boring old skill. 2 is an iframe, which is important for other reasons. And 4 is an iframe, which is important for other reasons. But you want to start with 3 and 5 because 3 gives you defense and offense, and 5 gives you tons of offense and a heal. So that's the first thing you want to look for in a character, is you want to look at the skills and you want to see what kinds of effects they're going to give you, so you can sort of come up with a preliminary idea. Okay, so like maybe I want to do 5-3 or 3-5, but you're not sure, right? You know that the 2 skills for buffs are 3 and 5 or 5 and 3. Those are the 2 skills, but you don't know which order you want to put them in. So then you look at the next thing you look at for a character, and this is where you have to go into skill preview. All my free-to-play players love this video because this is where you spend a lot of your time. Let's be honest. I'm kidding. But yeah, you want to look at skills that you can or can't cancel. So we already talked about skill canceling, but basically there are two types of skills in the game. There are skills that will persist when you cancel them, and there are skills that will immediately stop when you cancel them. So a very, very good example is Sharon Rogers' 5th and 4th skills. Her 4th skill, as soon as you interrupt it, it stops. She jumps up and does the blast. But if at any point during this animation you press another skill, it stops. No blast. So you cannot cancel her 4th skill and still get any of the effect. So it is a bad skill to cancel. It doesn't mean you should never cancel it, but it's a bad skill to cancel. On the other hand, her 5th skill, as soon as she does that, you can cancel it, and you can see the spears will still drop. Now, I believe you can cancel her 5th skill right away, and the spears will still drop. Actually, no, they don't. Okay, so you actually do have to wait for her to pull down. If you cancel too early, then the spears never show up. So you do have to wait for that pull down. If you don't wait for the pull down, oh, never mind. Okay, I don't even remember exactly with Sharon, but it's somewhere in the middle. So as you can see, there is definitely a finesse to this. There is definitely some very fine details that you need to pay attention to. There's a timing to it. There's definitely a timing to it. So doing this and then doing this, that is a much better use of her skills. Right, I got 146 hits. That's so much better than this. 4 cancel 5. Why would you ever do that? So now it's pretty obvious why some skills are, it's important to know which skills you can cancel and which skills you don't, right? Some skills have buffs that activate at the end, like Mr. Sinister. So you don't want to cancel those buff skills until the buff has appeared. Thor is another good example with his newest uniform. The longer you hold his 4th skill, the more of a buff he gets. So knowing how and when and which skills you can and can't cancel are really important. So the reason why, the other reason, the big reason why you want to know which skills you can and can't cancel is because of skill effect or skill damage stacking. So the best example of skill damage stacking is Cable. Because Cable has multiple skills that you can cancel almost instantaneously, you can stack all of his damage on 1 or 2 skills. So for example, his 2nd skill, you can cancel that. His 3rd skill, you can cancel that, and it'll still rain down. And his 4th skill, as soon as you see the clones, you can also cancel that. So you could just let the skill play out, sure, but why not do this instead? Why not do 2, 3, 4, and then 5? It wasn't the best possible rotation, but you sort of get the point of what I'm trying to say here. You do 2, you do 3, you do 4, and then you do 5, and suddenly you have the lasers from the 4th skill, you have the lasers from the sky from the 3rd skill, and you have his 5th skill, all working together in tandem. And that is called skill stacking. I'm stacking up to his 5th skill. Why did I choose Cable? Because all of his other skills can be canceled and the effects will still happen except for 5, right? As soon as you cancel 5, you lose the 5th skill. So you want to identify which skills you can and can't cancel. The skills that you can cancel will be the ones that will stack up to the skills that you can't cancel. And usually you will end your rotation, or you'll sort of end start your proc, your proc on your obelisk or your CTP. You want to start it on the skill that can't be canceled. That's why CTP of Energy works so well with Cable, because of the chain hit damage. Chain hit damage is just consecutive hits. You're going to get way more consecutive hits from doing this, right? So this, and then your proc would be here, and then all of this damage gets melted together for your proc, rather than just doing this for the proc, right? You get a 3-for-1 instead of a 1-for-1. So that's really important. So the skills that you can't cancel with are usually the skills that you want to finish with, and finish means your proc activates. And then the skills that you can cancel, those will contribute to your stack, right? So for Sharon, her stack is basically just 5 into 4. 4 is her finisher skill, and 4 is her big damage moneymaker proc skill. The next thing you want to do, and this one's probably the harder one to sort of showcase in the video, is you want to go into some sort of content and figure out which skills do the most damage. Again, you can do this in multiple ways, Shadowland, World Boss, etc. But you basically just want to go into a piece of content at some level. Again, the way you do the testing is up to you, but again, this is for players who want to figure this out. And you basically just take the character and you go and you see how much damage their different skills do. And you sort of figure it out. Generally speaking, the general consensus and the sort of the history of this game and the pattern is that the 4th or the 5th skills do the most damage. That's not necessarily the case for every single character, but it's almost always 4, or sorry, did I say 4 or 6? It's almost always 5 or 4, besides 6, obviously. So if we take a look at Carnage's skills here, and he has effects on, he's a buff on 5, so that does matter for the damage. But let's look at 4 here. Again, he has a rage proc, so it's a little bit hard for me to showcase it off for you guys. But okay, this skill did maybe about half a bar. Let's just say half a bar. Sure, whatever. Okay, so that was half a bar. Now we're going to take a look at his 3rd skill here. Okay, Captain America's dropping. Okay, this is actually so hard to test with these characters and stuff. I chose the bad team. But okay, let's look at his 3rd skill here. Okay, much less damage than 4, maybe like a 1/10 of a bar. Let's look at 2. I didn't even notice the damage at all. So you sort of get what I'm saying. So you basically do that sort of preliminary testing. Again, it's almost always 4 or 5 dealing the most damage. There are definitely some notable exceptions. I'll give you 2 examples right now. Scarlet Witch's 3rd skill does almost as much, if not more damage than her 4 and 5. Her 3 is excellent, and it's a long animation skill. And Ghost Rider, his 3rd skill is his strongest skill by far, basically because of these buffs. And then there's another example of a character who it's really tough to know which skill does the most damage. Now, why do you want to know which skill does the most damage? Because you want to know which skill to proc on. So you do your testing with Sharon Rogers, you find out that 4 does the most damage. So now you're like, man, perfect, 4 does the most damage and it's the finisher skill. So my proc is going to be 5 cancel 4, right? So it sort of does that. But what about if you have a character that you can't figure out which skill does the most damage? If you ask me which skill of Doctor Strange's does the most damage besides 6, I have no idea. And that's okay, that's good. Because Doctor Strange represents another thing that you need to look out for, which is long or short cooldowns. Now, Doctor Strange obviously has a little bit of a cheat code where he resets the cooldown of all of his skills, which allows you to spam all of his skills endlessly. And that's why I have absolutely no idea which one of Doctor Strange's skills does more damage, because they're always going off together. It's always 4, 3, and 2 simultaneously. It's not just 4, 3, or 2. But let's take another example. Professor X, not Dr. X, Professor X. So Professor X has 2 skills, or at least 1 skill with a really long cooldown, 5. It's got a super duper long cooldown. You can't see it here in skill preview, but it's a super duper long cooldown. And on the flip side, his 1 and his 2 have a really short cooldown. And you know what? His 3 and his 4 comparatively also have pretty short cooldowns. So you need to look at the cooldowns of the skill. This is 20 seconds. You guys can't see that quite. 20 seconds. Then we got 18. So those are pretty long. Then we got 15. But then we've got 8 and 7. So my rule of thumb is if the skill has longer than 18-second cooldown, that's considered a long skill. We can go up to like 30, 35. But yeah, above 18 is pretty long. And then less than 12 is pretty short. So he has 2 skills with a really short cooldown. And then he has 1 skill with a really long cooldown. So what that means when you imagine it is that rather than doing, let's say, you know, whatever, 4, 5, 3, 3, 1, 2, or 3, 2, 1, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. Rather than doing that, with someone like Professor X, you could start with their buff skill, which is their accumulation, and then you could do 1 and 2, and then 4 and 5, and then by the time you're doing 5, 1 and 2 are back, so then you can spam those skills. So what you should also do is look at the skill cooldowns and see if you can sort of spam or sprinkle in skills. Usually it's skill 1 or skill 2 that have really short cooldowns, but see if you can sort of sprinkle those skills in between other skills being on cooldown. Another really good example, and I'll take you into some content for this one so you can actually, why did I do that? So you can actually see this in action, is Ghost Rider. So for a fact, I know, and you guys all know, Ghost Rider, his 5th skill and his 4th skill and his 3rd skill have a really long cooldown, but his 1 and 2 have a short cooldown. So what I do is I'll do 5, and it's long cooldown, and then I do 4, and I let the skills play out, right? And then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle in 1 and 2, and then I'm going to go into 3. And we're going to do some damage, and then I'm going to do 2 and 1 again, and then back into 5. And so, see, I'm sprinkling in. It's sort of like if you play piano or if you play an instrument. See, I'm going to do 1 and 2 here, sprinkle them in, and then go into 4. You're sort of like doing these little flourishes, these little doo-doo-doo, these little notes in between your main, you know, melody or whatever. You're just sprinkling in these flourishes for a little bit of extra damage, and especially when it comes to tier 3 characters, to charge up their tier 3 skill faster. So that is really important to see, as well as taking a look at the skill cooldown and trying to understand those types of effects. Obviously, when you're talking about spamming skills and that kind of stuff, it's much easier to do with the CTP of Rage or a CTP of Judgment, so you have to take that into consideration. If I didn't have a Rage or a Judgment on Ghost Rider, maybe I can't do 1 and 2 because I don't want to risk triggering my proc. But we're talking about figuring out the optimal skill rotation. You might figure out the optimal skill rotation is with a Rage or a Judgment, and then you just have to make sort of a judgment call on whether you're going to rage over your wallet being destroyed because you gambled for CTPs. See what I'm saying? But at the end, you'll still have the best rotation for the character, and that knowledge is power. So The next thing you want to look at is you want to look at skills that are iframes. Now, iframes are tricky because it's the red X that shows up, and an iframe basically protects you defensively. It doesn't protect you from every skill, because if an enemy does a purple skill, or if in PvP you have a skill with iframe ignore, then you're not protected. Generally speaking, iframe skills are more important for PvP than PvE, but they're still important for PvE because most of the time when you use an iframe skill, you will stop the boss from moving or attacking you. Because when you are in an iframe, an invincibility frame, the boss doesn't see you anymore. You're invisible to the boss. That's why they can't attack you. That's why they can't do damage to you. So for example, during this skill, the boss can see me. I have invincibility, but the boss can see me. At the end there, he had a little bit of a iframe. During this skill, the boss can see Beta Ray Bill, so he's going to attack Beta Ray Bill. And because he can attack Beta Ray Bill, he can also do an iframe. He or she, or they can also do an iframe. So Proxima can interrupt you with an iframe, or Corvus, or Thanos, or Ebony. But look at this, his fourth skill, there is a gap, but it's mostly an iframe. Why are iframe skills important? Well, like I said, it stops the boss from attacking you, so you may want to consider having your finisher skill also be an iframe. It's not something that you have to do, but take this idea, for example. If I don't have Beta Ray Bill's awakening skill ready, what am I going to proc on? Well, maybe 5 and 4 do the exact same amount of damage, let's just say. But 5 doesn't have an iframe, and 5 can be canceled. 4 does have an iframe, and 4 can't be canceled. So you generally want to go with 4 because you can't cancel it, so you don't want to cancel 4 and lose the damage. But also, in the case of 5 versus 4, maybe you could cancel both of them, but 5 isn't an iframe. So you would do 4, cancel 3, cancel 5, but this is not an iframe. So the boss could interrupt you, or hit you and guard break you, or whatever. But now if I do 5, 3, 4, I'm iframing. The boss can't interrupt me when I'm iframing most of the time. So that's why Beta Ray Bill's rotation when you don't have his awakening skill is 5, 3, 4, and not 3, 4, 5 or 4, 3, 5. You end with the fourth skill because 1, it's a finisher skill, it can't be canceled. You can't cancel 4 and still get the hits. But 2, and almost as importantly, it's an iframe. And because, like Sharon Rogers' fourth skill, when she jumps up, it's an iframe, the boss won't be able to interrupt you most of the time during that iframe. And Ebony is one of the most notorious interrupters, super, super duper annoying. And that's why knowing which skills are iframes is really important, so that you can avoid getting canceled during a really, really clutch moment of your rotation. And you know what? Thor is another really good example of that, because as much as some people don't like his fourth skill, or they think it's dumb to not do it right away because of a buff, it's important to do other skills first, because, so let's take a look, right? 3, you can cancel it almost immediately and you still get all of these effects, right? 5, you can cancel it immediately and you still get all of these effects. So you can easily cancel 3 and 5. So you want to start with those skills. You want to end with 4, even though it's a buff, because it's an iframe. So now the boss has to sit through all of that lightning. Meanwhile, if you just do 4, sure, the boss has to sit through this, but then what if you do 5 and 3 and the boss iframes? What if they just teleport across the screen? What if it's Shadowland and they just run away from you? Then you get 0 damage. So that's why stacking these cancelable skills, like Beta Ray Bill, and then ending on 4 is actually the better move for Thor. Very similar, actually plays very similarly to Beta Ray Bill, except you hold the 4th much longer, and the 4th has a longer cooldown. So those are most of the effects, most of the important effects, and most of the important information that you need to look at when you are constructing a rotation. You got to look at the buffs, the debuffs, the buffs, and the effects of a skill. You have to look at what skills you can and can't cancel, stack skills versus finisher skills. You have to look at and test which skill does the most damage, because those are the skills you want to proc on. You want to take a look at long and short cooldowns to know that you can spam 1 and 2 in between Thor's rotation to build up his tier 3 more. And then you also want to look at iframe skills. But there is one more thing that's a little bit more difficult to explain. And again, it sort of matters more for PvP than PvE, but it still matters. And it is called sort of like the flow. It's maybe a corny way of talking about it, but it's kind of like the flow of skills. And where is... So essentially, what I mean by the flow of a skill is if the skill has movement. It's important to take note of this when you're really trying to refine and perfect a rotation. Again, it matters a bit more for PvP, but it also matters for PvE. So take Sentry, for example. He has a couple of different skills that are important to note for their flow and their movement. His second skill will zip him to and away from the enemy, but if you cancel it halfway, he ends up really close. So you can use that as a way to close the gap on an enemy that's far away. Similarly, his first skill will also dive in. So this is a sort of it closes the gap. That's important because some of his other skills have really bad targeting. So you don't necessarily want to be out here doing his 5th skill. Maybe you do, but maybe you'd rather be over here doing his 5th skill, because then you can cancel it into 3. If you're way out here doing 5, well, okay, he's really close to me, but for example, if you were really far away from a character doing 5, now I can't, okay, he can cancel into 3, but sometimes you can't cancel into other skills. So you use 1 to sort of close the gap. You can also use 2 to close the gap and then cancel into another skill. And then you can use 4 to close the gap and jump away. So in this case, 4, he jumps in and then he jumps out. So knowing those skills that move you in and out is really important, because it helps for PvP, it helps for positioning, it helps for following up with other skills, it might help with damage, and it also helps you to reposition yourself to take less damage. Another really good example of positioning is with Moon Knight. We got to go grab Moon Knight's uniform here. So Moon Knight has 2 skills that will move. He has multiple skills, but most notably his 2nd skill makes him dive away. It's not much, but it can matter in a setting. Let's say there's a meteor under you in ABX. You can use the 2nd skill to move away. On the other hand, his 5th skill will pull him really close. You can see there, he was way far away. He was like 3 cubes away or 3 squares away, and now he's really close. So you can use these types of skills, right? Maybe you don't want to start 4 way back here. You want to be closer for whatever reason. So that's why you do 5 into 4. So that you make sure that you're right up in their face and they're getting that full shotgun blast and all of those little particles, all those extra hits. Another good example of this is the most recent tier 3, Loki. Loki has a pretty frustrating rotation because sometimes if you're really far away with his 5th skill, he can't cancel into other skills. You can see that I'm trying to press 1, 2, 3, and 4, and nothing's happening. So, oopsie, I was really far away from the enemy. I just lost a full rotation's worth of damage with my other skills, and I just did 5. That sucks. So, knowing the flow of Loki's skills, knowing that 5 needs to be close to be canceled, and knowing that 3 will move you very close, lets you know that you should probably do 3 right before you do 5. So that's why a lot of players recommend 4, and 4 actually makes you move away. So 4-5 might be a really bad idea, right? Because if you do 4-5, then maybe you can't do 1, 2, 3. In this case, I could, but sometimes you can't. So that's why a lot of players recommend, and again, not me, I haven't played Loki very much, but a lot of players recommend 4, and then 3, and then 5. So that guarantees you the option of being able to cancel into 1, 2, 3, or 4 again after 5, or canceling into 6, or whatever. So that's kind of the last piece of advice and piece of information I want to leave you guys with. That one's much more difficult because it's taken on a case-by-case basis, player by player, and it also matters who your enemy is, your opponent. You know, I like staying a lot closer to Proxima than some of the other world bosses. Some bosses you want to maintain a bit of a distance from, like Thanos, to see what he's doing. Other bosses like Proxima, you want to be really close to them because you don't want to give them any breathing room to interrupt you or jump away. And of course, you know, if they jump too far away, certain skills don't have targeting, you get interrupted, yada yada. It's just a pain in the butt, right? Like Mr. Fantastic's tier 3 skill. How annoying is that if that gets canceled? So hopefully all of this information has helped you. A lot of it just comes through trial and error. So if you don't quite understand everything that I'm saying, that's okay. But you should be practicing and trying these things on your own in order to figure them out. It's obviously easier and faster sometimes to just go on YouTube or go on Twitch and ask a streamer or ask a YouTuber or just ask another player who plays the character. And obviously the community aspect of it is fantastic, but it's also important to play and figure these things out for yourself because it'll make you a better player. It'll make you appreciate the character builds and the design behind character skills more. And that's something I really appreciate about Marvel Future Fight. And you'll find the content easier over time because you'll get better and better. So hopefully all that has been helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.